This is the Bearcast, presented by Bird Culture Ford. Bird Culture Ford has been in Waco since 1936. Ford is the #1 selling truck in Texas, 43 years running. The Bearcast is also presented by WellMed Medical Management and USMD Health System Dallas. Here's Craig Smoke and Grayson Grundhafer.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into another edition of the Bearcast on SicEm365.com and SicEm365 Radio. Craig Smoke, SicEm365.com team reporter, also radio host, joined as always by Grayson Grundhafer, director of broadcasting, also SicEm365 team and recruiting reporter. And we come to you a week removed from name, image, likeness going into effect across college football. We've seen a couple of Baylor players sign, little sponsorship deals here and there. Matthew Myers got a little something going. Siaki Ika's playing video games along with like hundreds of other guys for some video gaming platform. And I'm sure there's other deals that we haven't just yet heard about or we will hear about, in the immediate future when they're ready to be announced. But it is a new world and been a lot of craziness going on in college athletics. But we do have some big Baylor news to talk about, and that is the fact that this recruiting class for both 22 and 23 continues to grow. A new 23 commit is in, a new couple of 22 commits, transfer in the fold now as well, and we will break all of that down and talk about all of that as well as get to the mailbag questions this week as always. But Grayson, before we dive into things, how you doing this week?
Yeah, I'm doing really well, and I got to say this was kind of one of those weekends, July 4th weekend, that I guess is a big trademark for recruiting as Baylor just continues to add recruiting momentum. As the dead period is hit, obviously that's going to stay into effect until later on in July. So it's nice to see them close really strong as the dead period is now here, and they're going to kind of probably take a step back. Obviously, the transfer portal is still something that they're going to continue to evaluate, still some names out there that they might take a look at. But as far as 2021 goes, or 2022 and 2023, I think this is an evaluation time period for a lot of the coaches to see if there's any guys who are deserving of offers from the camps that they attended and the various training videos they've been able to see, and just see if that's something that appeals to them. Of course, most kids are going to be starting fall camp here in the next month, and then the season's going to start, and that's when the staff's going to really take that evaluation role. But right now, I think it's been a very fun 2 months, I would say, for this staff.
So before we get into the commits, tell us what the schedule is from now on. I mean, you kind of referenced it there, but for those who don't keep track of the camp calendar and, what's going on, I will tell you we got Big 12 Media Days next week. So that'll be interesting. AT&T Stadium. We will be out there Wednesday and Thursday for coverage of that. I'm looking forward to it, and then again, kind of not, because man, it's going to be weird being around a bunch of people in the middle of a big old stadium, and that'll be cool, I'm sure. It'd also be just kind of weird, having just been kind of cooped up so much and so scattered around. Everybody's getting back together again. It's going to be really sort of odd. But where are we on the camp schedule and kind of what that looks like moving forward?
Yeah, so right now, they're like I mentioned, they're going to enter a dead period. So recruits won't be able to visit campuses officially, and really shouldn't be unofficially either, but those things happen. And then as far as kind of the outlook going forward, Baylor has a camp July 31st. That is right on the very end of the dead period. I think it ends July 25th, potentially 25th or 26th, something along those lines. So it's basically a month. Then the 31st, Baylor will have their last camp of the summer. And then obviously you're turning right around, and I believe fall camp should be starting that first week, that first Tuesday in August, I think somewhere along those lines. And then that lasts all the way up until game week, which will be against Texas State for Labor Day weekend. And so that's what it's looking like right now. That's the schedule. That's the layout. So as I mentioned, this is just an evaluation time period. As recruits are getting ready to start their season, the staff's going to evaluate more so when the season starts for a lot of these prospects who are maybe late bloomers. And so those are kind of the big things coming up, the big dates to keep in mind. And I know for Baylor purposes, they got to get ready for the season. Obviously, the recruiting's great, but you have to have a great season if you want to continue to carry that momentum into next year.
Well, nothing will tear a recruiting class apart like a bad season. So, I mean, we're all celebrating right now and excited about, the guys that are pledging, but to ensure that those guys actually end up Baylor Bears, and some of them will regardless just because they grew up liking the school or whatever, but especially when you start dealing with higher-rated guys, you better have some proof in the pudding, and they didn't have that last year, but now it's a fresh slate, a clean slate for them to actually go out there. If they go make a bowl game and have a nice turnaround season, then recruiting should just continue to blossom. But if they fall on their faces, then, there's going to be some repercussions for that. So, yeah, about a month from practices beginning, so while we wait on that to come around the corner, and of course, media days next week, we've got some new recruits to talk about. So we got 1 in 22, 1 in 23, and then a transfer. We'll start off with 22, where they now have 19 commits, and this will be the class that signs in December, and then some will be stragglers or whatever and sign in February, that first Wednesday in February. But the majority of the class will sign in December, and right now they're 19 strong. And they got that way last week by bringing in the addition of Cory Gordon, a safety out of Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. And they had gone from 0 defensive backs to now 2, with Devin Bobby and Cory Gordon being the 2 latest commits in this 22 class. So now they're starting to finally address defensive backs. What can you tell us about the young man out of the Sooner State?
Yeah, so Cory Gordon, not the biggest offer list you're ever going to see. Offers from Hawaii, Tulsa, South Dakota State, Abilene Christian, New Mexico. So not going to blow anyone away with the offers, but the biggest thing for him is his length and his athletic ability. So he's right around 6'3", 6'4", 180 pounds, which is something that this staff really likes for that high safety mold. So a JT Woods is kind of the position that I see Cory Gordon fitting in, and obviously he's going to have to show a lot speed-wise and versatility-wise in order to play that position, but I think you see it based on his film and also the fact that he's a dual-sport athlete. He's a very good basketball player. His athleticism really pops on the basketball court. His dunks are becoming famous. Colt has posted a ton of dunk videos, and Cory's posted a bunch of them as well. So very, very athletic and very bouncy, which is something you really want to see. Shows a lot of explosiveness and the capabilities to really have a higher ceiling. So I think that's the biggest thing with Cory. Obviously, he addresses a position of need as well. Safety, defensive back in general, they've really needed to address that. And Cory is one who he took his official visit, and I think all signs were pretty much pointing in the direction that this was going to be Baylor for him. July 4th, he made his decision. He had posted earlier in the week, and I had posted some notes about his decision coming up. And I just think it's such a great fit for him, and he's been a guy who's been in love with Baylor for a long time, really liked RG3, really grew up watching them. So I think it's a great fit.
So 19 commits now, 2 defensive tackles, 2 linebackers, 6 offensive linemen, a quarterback, a running back, 2 safeties, 3 tight ends, 2 wide receivers. So you're looking at 5 commits left. Just going on average recruiting class sizes, you're looking at about a handful of guys remaining in this class. You're not going to sign like 28 guys, so there's not another 10 out there, and you're not going to sign 20. So you got more than 1 to go. So there's somewhere between like 6 and a couple probably, or where they sit. So looking around, there's no corners in this group. And what else are you looking at when you look at these final few spots?
Yeah, so some big news dropped yesterday. Calvin Dinkins, he took his official visit to Baylor over the weekend. He decommitted from Southern Miss. Obviously, a weird recruitment because he had an offer from Baylor and Southern Miss, chose Southern Miss over Baylor back in March, but then took his official visit to Baylor. Absolutely loved it. And so yesterday he made his decision to decommit from Southern Miss. And so I would say that Baylor's probably in the lead with Calvin Dinkins at this point. It wouldn't shock me if he made that decision sooner rather than later, which would push them to 20 commits. And I've been saying for a while, I think 24 is the number that they're looking at. And you kind of look around and you go, okay, so they're still in it for Derek Brown. They're still in it for Jeremy Patton, trying to figure out what they're going to do there. DJ Allen is another one. Obviously, we'll get to another addition they made at wide receiver, but with DJ Allen, what's that spot look like now that they've added another prospect to the roster? It's going to be very interesting to see how they finish. They're running low on spots, and they're going to have to make some tough choices, I think, as this recruiting period kind of winds down.
So 2022 was addressed. 2023 is also growing. Now 2 commits in that class a couple weeks ago. It was Isaiah Crawford, the linebacker, who made his pledge to Baylor at a post. And now an offensive lineman. So they currently have 7 offensive line commits, counting the next 2 classes, 6 in 22 and now 1 in 23. And that 1 in 23 is out of Kingsville. His name's Justin Deleon. And he pledged just about 3 days ago. So what can you tell us about, another wave of guys to get to know? And some people already have quite a few 23 names memorized and they know about them and all that. But I think the majority of people, even if they're on our website, are still kind of locked in on these next guys, not the class after. But when you're at 19 halfway through the cycle, then you're going to already start working on the next one, and that's what they're doing. So Justin Deleon, what can you tell us about the big old offensive lineman out of Kingsville?
Yeah, so he's out of King High School in Kingsville, and he's one of those prospects who he showed up at camp and got the offer after the June 19th camp. Eric Mateos really liked him. He was in the studio, did an interview with us. Great kid. Was just waiting to see if an offer was going to come from Baylor, but was excited about the day and overall his performance on the day. He's right around 6'3". I'd probably say probably just a hair under 290, so already great size for his age. I do view him as a guard prospect going forward, but very physical, great size already. Baylor was his first offer, committed on the spot, so obviously that made things really easy for both sides, as he just knew where he wanted to be, and Baylor went ahead and offered him, and so a commitment was made pretty easy. I think he's going to be a guy that a lot of people that follow recruiting are going to really be watching him this year to see if he can blossom and really turn into a Power 5 guy on film, which I think is going to be the next big step for him. And I really don't have too many doubts about it. He looked really good at camp when we got to see him back in June.
So 22, 23, and then there was a transfer portal edition. Been kind of wondering if they would, go and get something else out of the transfer portal after, having some success in there this offseason. They've, obviously improved the offensive line. They've done different things with the transfer portal over the last couple of years, but a very familiar name. He was at Auburn for a season. He was originally a Baylor commit and then changed his mind and ended up somewhere else only to not like it there and be right back at Baylor. Hal Presley is now a Baylor commit once again, and he'll actually make his way to Waco this time around.
Yeah, so, Craig, this is actually a weird situation. He didn't actually play a season for Auburn.
Okay.
He was there for
He was at Auburn, though,
for 2
correct?
weeks.
Okay, for 2 weeks.
Yeah, for 2 weeks, because he was part of the 2021 class, right? So he literally showed up and then just decided, hey, this isn't really where I want to be. So a weird situation that happened there. Obviously, he did commit when Gus Malzahn was still there. So that maybe that change to Brian Harsin was something that played into his mind a little bit. But at the end of the day, he showed up at Auburn, didn't like it, made his decision to transfer, enter the transfer portal. And it's one of those recruitments that was really weird at the time when Baylor was recruiting him. He had a great relationship with James Blanchard early on in that cycle. And James Blanchard left to Carolina, so a big part of his recruitment was gone. Baylor had a tough season. I think that played a big role in it as well, especially on the offensive end. Receivers just, they struggled mightily. So he decided to go to Auburn. He then was at Auburn very shortly. James Blanchard comes back to Baylor, so that relationship is back in the fold. And then it just came down to whether Baylor was going to be okay with taking him back. Was Baylor going to be the school that says, you know what, it was just a mistake you made. You're too talented not to take. So we're going to take you even though we feel pretty good about the wide receiver position, and we're just going to see what happens. And I've mentioned a few times, I didn't know whether Baylor was going to offer him or not. But what I did know is if Baylor did offer, it was pretty much going to be a done deal because Hal knew where he wanted to be after kind of making that mistake that he made in his previous recruitment. So this is a big-time pickup. I know everything I heard about Hal. He is an NFL guy, a guy who the staff feels really good about possibly becoming an NFL draft prospect. His numbers bear that out. 46 receptions, 1,200 yards, 17 touchdowns in his final season at Mansfield Summit. Had a really good career there, and is a guy who I do believe can do some really good things, really exciting things for Baylor. He'll be able to play this year, which I think is also an interesting thing to note. And at 6'3", 190, gives them some more size on the outside at the wide receiver position, which is something that I do think they need, even though I do believe in the position group as a whole.
So a pretty strange turn of events. Dude, once Baylor's kind of done with a recruitment or whatever, I don't really keep track of guys too much. I think I went back and looked at the 2016 class. We kind of compared them as the years went along, and they're all pretty much gone now. And that ended up not even being that big of a deal, quite frankly. I don't think that there was really any guys out of Kellen Mond maybe, and he ended up being an NFL draft pick, but outside of him, I'm trying to think, Baron Browning, but he wasn't even going to be a guy that probably signed with Baylor. So, yeah, like Presley, once he was like a flip, I was like, all right, see you later. And had no idea he was on campus for like 2 weeks at Auburn and left. Yeah,
it's just one of those weird situations, like I said, and it does feel like it was a lot longer ago just because he decommitted so long ago. But yeah, he wasn't an early enrollee, so he just arrived really late to Auburn, and obviously things did not go the way that he was hoping they would.
Yeah, clearly. So Auburn's loss is Baylor's gain, and there's another wide receiver in the fold. So for people that ask, what kind of wide receiver spot is he looking at? Is he an inside, outside? What do you kind of size him up as?
So he's an outside receiver for sure, and if you look at the 2021 class now, you just kind of have to sit there and wonder what's going to happen with that position group, because Elijah Bean, Javon Gibson, Hal Presley, Cam Bonner. Cam could probably play slot, but the other three are pretty much locked in at outside receiver just because of their size. It makes total sense. Monterey Baldwin is a little bit different, and obviously Drew Estrada is a grad transfer, so it doesn't quite count the same way, but that's 6 guys that they brought in 2021, so clearly a need that they were trying to address. And Hal will slot on the outside. I think he's going to give them somewhat similar, hopefully similar impact to a Denzel Mims. I think that's the hope, that he'll be a guy who can actually go up and make contested catches on the outside while having great size. And they really haven't had that since Mims left. I know Taekwon could get there this year. And then, of course, they use RJ kind of all over the field a little bit. So kind of a different wide receiver, in my opinion, than RJ Sneed. So he'll be a good one. I think he's going to be a fun one to watch, and hopefully this Baylor staff can really develop him into the guy that I know they think he can be.
Yeah, and, I don't want to make this a personal shot in any way, but I am kind of thankful that when we start talking about wide receivers, there's a little less of a logjam now there with Jared Atkinson deciding what he decided, because, I was just thinking as you were mentioning outside guys, like if this were the last 5 years, you would have said at some point, Jared Atkinson's got the potential, and like, we're not doing that anymore. And it's not, a knock on him. It's just like, it's good that there's not kind of like those traffic jams that have sort of been in place, like with the quarterback spot. It's funner, it's more fun to talk about the quarterback race when we know there's actually a race, and not like, okay, it's Charlie Brewer and then whoever else, So, yeah, this team has undergone some changes with the roster, but also just some pieces that have been in place that have been moved or have left, kind of create even more excitement for some new potential. So I think at wide receiver you see that, and at quarterback you'll see that obviously. But, yeah, hey, welcome Hal Presley to the fold. Glad you finally got your decision right and you're where you want to be. And, that's something that we don't take into account very often when it comes to recruits. We just, they get sprayed with attention and they get this and they get that. And then, sometimes you commit somewhere because you're on a high, from visiting, and that happens quite a bit. And sometimes that high lasts, and that's really where you wanted to be. And sometimes it fades away, and maybe it fades away the moment you step on campus and you realize, oh, shoot, I made a big mistake here.
Right, and that's the thing with Hal that's so tough to really make a judgment on, is just the simple fact that he signed when Gus Malzahn was still the coach. And I know you're supposed to commit to the university. I get all that. but he was committed when Gus Malzahn was still the coach. He gets fired, and he's still locked into his commitment and gave Auburn a shot, which I actually think is really commendable, to be honest. He could have just been like, oh, no, I'm going to enter the transfer portal now and do it sooner. But he gave Brian Harsin a shot, obviously didn't like it. And so that happens sometimes. And with the one-time transfer rule, I think we're seeing some kids get their situation right, kind of correct the mistake, while others kind of amplify the mistake that they already made. So it's just kind of one of those things. It's a give-and-take situation. But I am intrigued. You mentioned Jared Atkinson. I'm looking at the freshman class right now. I mean, you're going to have a logjam at some point. You're going to have to. I mean, Monterey Baldwin, Cameron Bonner, Javon Gibson, Elijah Bean, Seth Jones is a redshirt freshman, and then now Hal Presley. That's a lot of guys in that freshman class, and that's not even mentioning Jalen Ellis and Jackson Gleason, who are a year older and 2 years older in the fold as well. So eventually there might be a traffic jam similar to what we saw with some of the guys in the past.
Well, if you've been in the left lane for the last 2 years and you're going 60 when everybody else is trying to go 80, then you probably need to get out of the way. And so for the Jackson Gleasons and those types of guys who've been around for a couple years, it's producer, get out of the way, basically. Right. I mean, trying to be just as matter of fact about it, not sugarcoat it. Like, there's guys that have been around for 2-3 years and we haven't seen really much of anything. So, I don't worry so much about the new guys committing because, shoot, they're fresh. They're ready to come in and actually contribute. So for those guys who have been around for a little while, it's like, hey, you better get the boogie in here pretty quickly or you're going to get passed over. So that should produce more competition, more numbers. All that should only be a good thing if handled correctly, and I assume the staff will handle all those things correctly. So, what a week. Not often you see two different recruiting classes and a transfer portal edition all in the same, few days. But that's what happened with Baylor last week. And, if anything overshadowed that, Grayson, I guess it would have been name, image, likeness going into effect. And, it's a hard thing to even wrap your head around because it's like everywhere you look, there's some new thing or new agreement or new whatever. It's not. I'm not trying to be dramatic here and be like, oh my gosh, the sky is falling. It's just a new world. It really is. And what have been your impressions of this first week of name, image, likeness?
Yeah, I'm really worried about it. I'm very concerned about the repercussions for it because I just don't feel like the NCAA really figured this out.
Oh, they didn't do anything. They were completely a joke.
They just kind of opened it up, said, oh, it's going to be an open market. And players can use their name, image, and likeness to make money, but we all know that it's a slippery slope because it's not going to be used for what it was intended for, in my opinion. In some cases, others it'll be perfect, great situation, but I just think there's going to be major advantages to certain universities compared to others. And so I think this year we're going to find out a little, and then I think next year when it really starts to ramp up, I think we're going to figure out a lot. As far as the 2023 class goes, we're going to get to know kind of exactly how deep this is going to go and just how bad or good it ends up being.
Yeah, we were told last week by somebody in Baylor compliance in one of the interviews, and then just reading about it, is there's not supposed to be any inducements. There's not supposed to be, when people are on campus, you can, help through the school and their partnerships or whatever, get a deal done. But the school itself isn't supposed to be saying or people attached to it like, hey, you come here, you make this money, a.k.a. inducements. There's not supposed to be any inducements. That's what I heard over and over and over again last week. First story I read today, very first story I saw, very first one, Miami Booster offers $540,000 name, image, likeness endorsement deal to all Hurricane scholarship football players. This guy, Dan Lambert, who's attached with American Top Team Training Facilities and MMA, they're successful fighting group, have been over the years, American Top Team. But basically he's going to have, if you sign with Miami, you're going to be a part of helping to, promote these gyms that he has across Florida, these American Top Team gyms. So just simply by being a Miami player. Last week I also saw a story, and it was right after we had just heard about, well, you're not supposed to have inducements. Dayton former player says his furniture company is going to sponsor every single player who plays for Dayton. So it's like, these are all inducements. These are what is an inducement if it's not, hey, if you come here, you will get this? That's an inducement. So that's two examples I've seen without even trying. And so I already feel like, it's already broken, what was supposed to be from the jump. I'm already seeing the complete opposite of that, and that was to be expected somewhat. But, yeah, I don't know, man. Like, part of me, I am all for the athletes getting what they deserve based off their name, image, likeness. But, like, the fact that the grown-ups are going to get involved and try to buy their personal dreams, through all this, I know that was kind of going on anyway, so now we basically just ripped the cover off of it, and it's all just on the surface. But I don't know that I like it. I think it's just kind of weird at this point.
Right, and the NCAA is going to do nothing about it now.
Well, what have they ever done? They can't even punish Baylor. It's been 6 years since the thing started.
I know, but then you got guys like Reggie Bush saying how he should have his Heisman back. And it's like, dude, you cheated when the rules were in place.
Yeah.
Like, you still did it. You still cheated. You still took money when it wasn't allowed. So I just think it's one of those slippery slope things that I think the NCAA did not really think through. And now they didn't have time to do it. They should have given themselves time to do it. But in this very instance, they didn't expect it to happen. And when you don't prepare for things, you don't take initiative, this is what happens. And now it's open market. It's a professional sport, and it's going to be really interesting to see if college sports can last with that kind of mindset.
Well, you can't really blame the NCAA. They only had many years to try to come up with a plan, and they just sat on their hands and did absolutely nothing. And then every time a deadline came up, they said, I don't know, you decide, and then we'll go with that. And then they get decided for them, and then they get a couple years to figure out the details of that, and they sit on their hands, and they come back when the deadline's approaching and go, I don't know, I thought you were supposed to do that. And then the other side does that, and they try to fight a little bit only to cower like little children. And then another deadline comes up, and surprise, they have nothing ready, and they default to the other person to make the decision for it's a joke, dude. It's a joke of an organization. It really is.
They are never proactive.
Then ever. They never do anything proactive. They never are on the cutting edge of anything. They're always scrambling on their heels in response, and even then they never even have a response. It's always like, will give us to the deadline. And then the deadline comes, and like I was saying, I don't know. They never have any answer to anything. And then they just pop their heads out every few months to, take scholarships away from Middle Tennessee State or something for, a bowling scandal. You know what I mean? It's like that's all we ever hear about if they're not promoting some event they're making money off of. And so I just wish they would blow up that organization, because the way name, image, likeness was handled, and look, they could have had the most well-run business in the entire world at the head of this, and name, image, likeness still would have passed, just because simply there's no argument against it. But to not have any parameters in place or anything even ready for the possibility of it, and then when it rolls around, to not only not have anything ready, but basically just say, we're so incompetent, we're just going to leave it up to the schools. What are you there for? What is your... I go on this rant every week now, because I'm fed up about the Baylor thing still not being decided 5 years later, which is a crock in and of itself. But then I just see this name, image, likeness thing coming down the tracks, and everybody knows it's coming, and they just do nothing. They just sit there and let the government tell them what to do. And it's disgusting, because these people are raking in millions of dollars to basically be party planners. That's what they are. They promote events, and they do basically nothing outside of that.
Right, and at what point does everyone decide, and does colleges decide that the NCAA just, what's the point?
Blow it up, man.
What's the point of even having it? And so I think that's where the question is going to come in. And then at that point, where do college sports stand? If NCAA is gone, if you kind of rip that Band-Aid off, what do you do next? And how do you govern a body that was supposed to be governed that hasn't been for how many years? 50 years? Or forever.
Dude, I remember there was a time when I was younger when you feared the NCAA, and I think some people still do, but they only fear them now because they know they can basically just throw out punishments and then wait for the legal part to settle in. But I don't know what they do besides party plan and rake in money. This legislation, look at the transfer stuff and how much of a mess that was. Whose fault was that? That was the NCAA's fault. Why was that their fault? Because they were not proactive, and they sat on their hands and then scrambled. And, do you sense a pattern yet? It's what they do, and why they are even allowed to be part of the decision-making outside of just being the boss by default. I don't know. I would be so done with them. if I were college officials and realized, like, hey, we're the ones making all the decisions anyways. Like, they basically told us to make the decision for them. Why don't, yeah, like, and I definitely think there's those conversations happening. Like, I think there's something that's going to shake things up in the future. I don't know what it is, but even talking to Mack Rhodes about the NCAA, you can sense his frustration. And it's not just because of the Baylor investigation. It's like he's part of these decisions, and it's frustrating. You can tell when it's like, why is it this way? Well, you know, it's always something. It's always something with that organization. So here we are, name, image, likeness. I'm for that. But just the handling of it and the kind of the parameters or lack thereof that have been put in place, I just think it's typical NCAA. Typical NCAA. So, anything before we get in the mailbag this week?
No, let's do it. We got a lot of questions. It's going to be a fun mailbag.
All right, let's get into it. Brown BW, any more news on Dare? Or how do you say this guy's name?
I think it's Dare.
Dare Rosenthal,
Dare
the
Rosenthal.
big offensive lineman out of LSU.
Yeah, so not a whole lot breaking right now. I think that right now it's honestly in a standstill. And I know a lot of people are talking about Kentucky and kind of the major movement that they've been able to make. I know a lot of people are jumping on that bandwagon as to where Rosenthal is going to end up. And right now, I don't even know if Baylor's made a decision yet. I cannot confirm that they've offered him, which I think is very interesting. And I do believe if Baylor doesn't offer him, then they have a great reason why they didn't. You know, they did their background. They looked at it and decided this was just not the right fit for this program because talent-wise, he's a perfect fit. So I think that's the decision right now. I know Dave Aranda and staff are still kind of contemplating this situation and probably still recruiting him and talking to him. I just can't confirm if they've offered or not yet.
Yeah, and, you know, given kind of some of the headlines he had, I wouldn't be surprised if they looked at it and said, you know, maybe it's just not worth the risk, or maybe it's just, you know, I don't know, or maybe they do want him and they're trying to figure it out. But we're still on that watch, I guess, for the time being. Alpha Needle, most of the Sikkim staff had a low probability of signing Cory Gordon as of June 25th. Why? Were you unsure if he was a take for Baylor or not sure Gordon would commit?
So I think it's important when we put in predictions, there's two factors that go into it. So saying low probability of him signing or committing to Baylor, that's not really what it means. I mean, if you're putting in a prediction for Baylor, that means Baylor is the leader. So, I mean, it's not really a low probability since they're the leader in his recruitment. So we typically do low, medium, high. I have my own scale for it. So I'll put low if I don't know the exact date that a prospect's committing, or if I don't have complete confirmation in kind of where his decision's heading. A high decision usually means imminent. Something is coming very soon. I have a lot of confidence in it. And medium means I have more telling information as to where the prospect's heading, whether it's from the recruit or just the sources that I talk to. So again, I wouldn't say low probability is a thing when you're putting in predictions. It's more a low, but Baylor's still the clear leader in my mind. And then the other factor to it is I put in my prediction on June 24th and had Baylor as his leader. So I didn't want to change it on July 4th because for me, I just don't really do that. I think that's kind of ruining a prospect's time to make their decision. I already had a prediction and already posted notes kind of about where I thought this was trending, but I don't really do it to kind of snowball right before he commits. He'd put his date out. I'd commented on it, pretty much made it clear that Baylor was in the lead, and that's usually how we do things. Instead of changing the date and putting it on July 4th right before he commits, I just personally don't do that. Most of us don't do that on the staff.
Yeah, if you want to see people make a prediction right before somebody commits, go to 247. That happens all the time. They have their little grade calculator, so you get points right for, and you just see like the same three people all predict this out of nowhere commit within 5 minutes of each other. I kind of got over that pretty quickly because it was obvious what was going on. It was a lot of follow the leader stuff, but yeah, that's a good explanation for how you guys do it on Sikkim 365. Sam 19, what's the probability of football getting anthracite uniforms? Most of our other major sports have them, and I thought the whole point of the Baylor United deal was so all of our sports would be the same across the board uniform-wise. Well, they are the same across the board uniform-wise. Every green's the same green. Every gold's the same gold. And if you go back before the Nike deal, you would have seen I remember somebody actually had the really like accurate calculations, but it was like 6 shades of green across the sports. It was like 4 shades of gold. You know, it was different accent colors. It was, you know, different everything. So you could line up 10 different teams and you'd have like 7 different looking uniforms. And I remember being bothered by that just my eyes were bothered by the fact that like there wasn't any coordination between the different sports teams on the same campus. I just thought that was so odd. So the Nike deal's been a good thing, but we have seen, you know, basketball and others pull out the anthracites. Have you heard anything on the football front? I certainly haven't, and I don't know that they're opposed to it. I don't know that they're really feeling any kind of one way or another about it. The Nike deal didn't prohibit any alternate uniforms, but I know they were kind of from the jump just wanting to focus on the main green and gold and the combinations that they could do with that. So anything on your end that you've heard about that?
I just remember when they released the jerseys, they did talk about potentially adding some combinations in the future. It just is a matter of timing, when they want to do that, how they want to go about it, what color scheme they want to add. Anthracite would make sense, I suppose. But I do think right now they're pretty much... I think they're pretty structured in what they've done so far. I don't see it happening this year. I feel like that would have been released already, but maybe in the years to come. I mean, I did hear about it when they first released these uniforms that they might come out with some alternate combos here and there, but I think right now for this 2021 season, I think they're probably going to roll with the 3 kind of templates they have.
Yeah, and if you remember, basketball had like they got their one alternate, and you know, each one got their one alternate, and I think they were the silver, anthracite, whatever. And baseball's got some options, but you know, football just from the jump was pretty clear cut, and you can make a lot of different combos with the different uniforms that they do have. So we'll see. Texas Rainmaker, why would Dare Rosenthal pick Kentucky over us? Does he want to stay in the SEC? Are coaches the ones who recruited him, so maybe he'd want a fresh start?
I mean, I think it's one of those. So, I don't really know why it would be Kentucky. I know they've put guys in the pros, so I think that's something to kind of look at. I know they've been recruiting him very hard as well. SEC-wise, I mean, he went to LSU, so obviously there is some SEC draw there, but I do think that if Baylor did pursue him very hard, I think they would get him. So my point is, if he doesn't end up at Baylor, I do think it's more of Baylor's choice in this particular situation. I think I'd probably be safe in saying that.
Yeah, everybody's. I'm seeing lots of questions about this kid. Maybe they don't want him. Like maybe they've decided that they don't have room, or that it's not worth the trouble, or maybe I mean, look at his history. There is reason to be cautious. Like he's not some perfect angel that's never gotten into trouble. Like part of the reason why he's transferring is because he was getting into trouble. So like. I mean, I get the offensive line needs help, but are you willing to risk team chemistry bringing this guy in? Are you willing, to upset the apple cart by bringing this guy in potentially? Not saying that's what would happen, but that's what they have to figure out too. And so it's not just simply let's grab this offensive lineman that's available. The scholarship numbers are another factor. The team chemistry. There's a lot that goes into that. So just because he's available. I mean, look, there's a billion other schools out there, and they're not picking up Dare Rosenthal right now either. So
that's true. Now, I will say, if Baylor does go all in and don't land him, that would be an issue because they've had kind of a head start, I feel like, in potentially offering him. Plus, if they feel like what has happened off the field and culturally he's an okay fit worth a scholarship, then his on-the-field production, I mean, he is a legit NFL prospect. He's a guy who could come in and really help them at the tackle position, has made numerous starts at LSU, played a little bit on the national championship team, played quite a bit last year at tackle. So talent-wise, I think it's there, but you're right. I mean, right now it just seems kind of a matter of, does Baylor think he's worth the risk? With all the violations, he's been suspended, I think, 3 different times at LSU. But, are they bad enough reasons to not take him? I think that's really the debate that's going on for Dave Aranda and probably the rest of the staff that he's talked to about.
Also from Texas Rainmaker, what's the value in waiting to hire our 3rd assistant women's basketball coach? Are we trying to hire a coach who can bring a player or 2 with them? Are there contractual reasons why an assistant would want to wait until midsummer to change jobs? I don't know. Nikki Collin, I mean, she already knows who it is. They're just waiting on the announcement. She's been very diligent in her hiring, and this was one that Mack Rhoades even said last week. Like, here's the thing is, do you want the staff done or do you want it done right? Like, that's what people need to ask themselves. Like, there's a certain amount of time that I agree, like, hey, this is taking too long, like, finish the staff already. But Mack Rhoades gave the example last week of, like, she could have had the staff done pretty quickly. But, like, just something in her was like, I need to wait on this last one. And so she did, and what happened was somebody else actually became available, or she found out how to interest, or even a couple people that were better than who she could have hired because she simply just followed her gut and was patient rather than like, I better hire people to hire people. It's like, no, she took her time, and we should hear any day now. I don't know what like the hang up is or whatever, but I do know that this was not somebody who just she had always targeted, and it's just been a negotiation the entire time. Like, this was somebody who apparently was made available during the process. So I just think she's being very careful. I get people who are getting impatient, but I also know the third assistant coach isn't going to be somebody that puts them over the top for a national title. Like, that they could help, but they're not going to be like the missing piece to the Holy Grail or anything. So what are your thoughts on those questions?
I think a lot of people are overreacting right now to what is going on as far as her hiring process, and I think most people are thinking that she's missed out on her top targets. You know what I mean? I think that's the natural inclination that everyone has when you don't hire a coach really quickly, that you missed out on who you were looking for. But I don't think that's the case here. I think this is a situation where, like you mentioned, she waited, and for good reason. She didn't feel like the best fit was currently out there, waited, and obviously someone else became available. And now, you know, we'll find out who it is, and we'll kind of be able to see kind of the reasoning for waiting and kind of why. Probably. I think we'll get a better idea of why. But I can tell you, I trust this staff right now. I think they've done a great job with the staff that they've hired, and I think Nikki Collin is really a rock star. After hearing her live in studio, I just felt I got a great feel for kind of what's going with the direction of this program and kind of what she's going to bring to the table. I really like this staff, and I think it's going to continue with the next hire.
I know there are some people who think that only one person could ever win in basketball at Baylor, and I'll disagree with you till the lights go out. But you're entitled to your opinion. But I think that what comes with that is people just wanting to question everything that Nikki Collin does now, as though she doesn't know what she's doing and only one person knew how to do it. And I'm not saying that's how everybody is, but I definitely get that vibe from just people here and there of like, well, this is how Kim would have done, and that's kind of like, I know that's going to be a thing for a little while, but after Nikki Collin sat in here like 10 feet away from us and did an interview for like an hour, I walked away way more confident in her abilities. Like, I already felt good about the hire, but like hearing her just talk about, hey, I'll actually allow my players to shoot threes, things like that. I have all the confidence in the world in her, and I don't think this last assistant coach is going to be like make or break to the season. I think it's just calculated is what it is. And so, look, I know there's going to be some hesitancy because this is uncharted territory and whatnot for a lot of people, but I think there's a dang good basketball coach that Baylor hired here in the last few months that's going to do really well, and just got to give us some time and patience, kind of like with her coaching staff. Got to just give the program a little time and patience, and I think she'll do a really good job when all is said and done. So thank you, Texas Rainmaker, and I would imagine that last hire is going to be announced, at any point, really. Expected at any time. Kasich Bear, what's y'all's expectations of the offense this season? Will Grimes take shots down the field, or will we be trying to establish the run more and take what the defense gives us?
Yeah, I think that you're going to see more shots downfield than, say, what we saw last year, and probably in 2019 as well. I do think that that's going to be a staple of the offense, but I think a key to it is going to be running the football. I think if you watch BYU from a year ago, they did a great job in play action. That was really an area where they were able to take advantage of the defense and take those deep shots down the field. And I think Grimes will try to make that happen at Baylor as well. So, yes, I do think they're going to take more shots. They flat out are. They're going to try to push the ball down the field some, but they're also going to want to bring that same mindset that Matt Rule's group had in 2019, where you have to be able to run the football. You have to be able to run the football, and obviously everything is predicated by the offensive line. So if they can't block at all, then it's going to be hard to take shots downfield. But I do anticipate we'll see more than, say, a year ago or even 2019, to be honest.
Yeah, I think we'll see way more action down the field, but it ain't going to be like the Bryles teams or anything like that. Although there will be, I think, a similarity in the run setting up the pass. You know, running the ball sets up the big shot. Could potentially be something you get accustomed to seeing again. But no, they're definitely going to want to run the football and be multiple and be exciting. Like I'm ready. I feel like there's actually some competency in place right now, whereas last year, and I don't mean this as a knock on Larry Fedora or anybody else, because just throw 2020 out. Like, I mean, just everybody can do that. In 2020, just erase it and don't really judge too much off of that in some cases. So I don't judge the offensive staff entirely off that, but I think the combination of just a bad fit and a bad year was just bad, and I can't wait to see an actual offense that looks like they know what they're doing out there for once.
Right, and has some swagger. They had zero swagger, zero just drive, it seemed, last year. They just kind of lost hope down the stretch, I feel like, unfortunately. But, yeah, just not a greatly coached offense, in my opinion, last year.
No. Just curious also from K-Sig Bear if you guys think we'll have more tempo come out swinging on offense if we'll have more tempo come out swinging in offense than last year or even in 2019, and you kind of just said that. I do too. Wacko for Waco, do you expect Zach Pyron to get a ratings bump due to his performance at Elite 11? SI gave him a final rank of 9 out of 20, and the Elite 11 staff named him among the final 11, and we had Zach on the radio about a week ago before Elite 11, I think it was. Our guests get confusing in my head, but we had him on recently, and I know he's excited about the opportunity, and Grayson apparently did pretty well for himself.
Yeah, he made the Elite 11, and that's great. And I think that's going to give him a lot of recognition. I do think he'll end up being a 4-star guy. Now, I don't want people to get crazy and think that he's going to be the 5-star _1 quarterback in the country. That's just simply not going to happen. But I do think he can be a 4-star guy. I think he'll be similarly ranked to maybe Gary Bohannon, Jacob Zeno. Kyron Drones is the highest ranked. I don't think he'll get as high as Kyron did. But, yeah, I think Zach will get the ratings bump. It's just hard because any 247 analyst can use the debate that he doesn't have offers and things like that. And it's really easy to debate that. But I do think his performance in front of people should give them the confidence that they can push him up a little bit into that 4-star territory.
Scotty B., the Baylor King, how much of an impact do y'all think the 2 baseball transfers who signed in Matt Volker from Loyola Marymount and Jake Jackson from Nevada will make next year? I appreciate it and sick them. And has there been any other chatter? I know college baseball has taken a backseat fully now until they go back to Omaha next year, basically. Yeah. But has there been any other stuff about Arizona and Steve Rodriguez? Have you seen any more on that?
I have not.
Okay, just wondering. I know that there's plenty of people that were like, all right, see you later, like go right ahead. And I think that's kind of the temperature right now of the baseball program after coming up short this past season. But, yeah, how do you see these 2 transfers impacting Baylor baseball?
Well, I think the fact that they're adding transfers should kind of ease some of those things if you are a Steve Rodriguez fan. I know, some, like you said, some are kind of jumping off the boat, and I would not do that. I do think that there's still a lot left for Steve Rodriguez to do. And as far as these guys who they brought in, so they're veteran guys. Both are 3- and 4-year guys, about to be seniors, grad transfer guys. Volker is more of a bullpen guy in my mind. I think that he could end up being the closer for this team. There's a possibility of that. He had the most saves on the team at Loyola. 1.47 whip is just okay, not great. So I think he'll just kind of be a solid bullpen guy, but could potentially be the closer. Of course, Luke Boyd leaving, so there's some room there for Volker to possibly do that. Jake Jackson, on the other hand, I view him as a midweek starter. I do not think he'll be a weekend guy. Went 5-4 last year at Nevada, 1.71 whip, so solid, but I do think more midweek than maybe a weekend guy. I think Baylor's got some other arms that will be cover the weekend. But, hey, you need guys during the midweek. You need guys who can give you depth at the starting position, because when you go into regionals and various things like that, you have to have depth in your starting unit. And we saw that this year with Baylor at the Big 12 tournament. They came up short depth-wise, and it cost them a game.
Yep, and Arizona hired with the Tigers' third base coach to be their new baseball coach. So that was something that happened over the last 24 hours. Chip Hale will be the new Arizona Wildcats baseball coach. So Steve Rodriguez will not be going there. And, yeah, it's a big year for them. I think it's an important year for Baylor baseball because even though last year was odd, it's just like kind of just need to get a little something going because especially with all that's going on around you too. But, you know, it's not like they haven't had any success recently. It's just been a little over a year, and that's been that seems like 3 based on the way the last year has gone. All right, Bruin 92, is Dare to Kentucky a lock?
I don't think it's a lock right now. I would definitely not call it a lock.
DC Bear, NCAA ever going to put up or shut up on its football investigation? Good question. We've been asking that. Mac Rhodes, we asked him last week. Asked him just last week. He has no idea. So, you know, we're 5 years in, folks. 5 years. Legit 5 years since this whole thing started. Entire people have come and gone at Baylor and gotten degrees and already in their first year at a job since this thing started. I mean, that's freaking flat out stinking ridiculous. The courts have taken less time with some of these actual cases involving Baylor than the NCAA's overall sports-only related investigation has taken. Hell, I'd be surprised if they even started the investigation based on the NCAA at this point. That's something they'll get around to, I'm sure. I was always kind of the opinion they were going to wait for the courts to settle all these things and then come in after the fact and be like, well, here's what we have to say about it. So, again, letting someone else do all the work for them and telling them what the outcome is only to come in and try to put their polish on it. Does that sound like something they do quite often? Well, it is, clearly. But, I mean, you do that, these court cases aren't going to be all done by the end of the year. So you're going to drag it out for another year, if not 2, if not 3, depending on how long this takes. Like, you can't wait on the courts to do it. So I don't know at this point what they are waiting on. And COVID just seems like an excuse because I've seen other penalties handed down to lesser schools for lesser things. But I just cannot imagine what the holdup is at this point. And I'm tired of it being well, there's a lot going on. And, well, there's never not going to be a lot going on, especially now. Now that you've opened the floodgates, it's never going to slow down to what it was. It's just not if you're the NCAA. So get it done, get it over, and let's move on. Chris C. Bear, NCAA needs to go away. They pick on schools like BU and kiss the Blue Bloods. But, I mean, They've tried to whip the Blue Bloods in the past, like Miami they did, and USC, and, you know, whatever. But, yeah, they're basically just a nuisance more than an authority. Brown Bear, what is your favorite stadium you've seen college football game in other than McLean?
Ooh, I really have not gotten to go to a lot of college football stadiums. Kyle Field was pretty cool. It's just hard to get over the fact that A&M plays there. But it is pretty cool. I would probably go with that, even though some of the bowl game venues, which were in pro stadiums, were pretty good. The Cardinals Stadium back in 2013 was pretty nice, and obviously the Cotton Bowl, AT&T, is nice as well. But I'll go with Kyle. It was pretty fun atmosphere, and I got to see a pretty good game there when I went.
Yeah, I've been to Oklahoma's a few times. It's a really nice stadium, Gaylord Family Memorial. It's not bowled in, or I guess now it is. I haven't been since they bowled it in, actually. But it was nice before they even bowled it in. Kyle Field is nice. It's weird though. It's like it's almost too big in some ways, but like once you get it packed in there, then it's just, you know, it's too big when there's not like a full crowd in there. You're just like, this is weird. But then with a full crowd, obviously it's crazy and
just so loud.
Yeah, because it's, you know, it's designed that way. It's just built in to keep that noise in almost. And I'm trying to think of anywhere else that's really noteworthy. I haven't been to a lot of college stadiums either. You know, and all of them are nice for what they are. But yeah, like Oklahoma's and A&M's are probably the nicest ones. I haven't really been to many. Let's see. Brown Bear also asked, which stadium would you like to see a game that you haven't yet?
Yeah, Michigan versus Ohio State at the Horseshoe, for sure. The Horseshoe is just one of those atmospheres I really, really would want to. That stadium's just so cool. And the games seem so loud. Yeah, that would definitely be one. I will say, honorable mention, the guys in here were talking a little bit about Penn State's uniforms, but when they do a whiteout in their stadium, I mean, that looks so cool as well. So that would be a fun atmosphere too.
Yeah, it's the default. Everybody always says, like, the Rose Bowl at sunset and whatever. And it's like, yeah, I'm kind of over that now. That's not – I don't know. It's not, like, my top dream. I would say, like, your example would be one somewhere that's not obvious, and I don't know what that – I actually have been to Florida State Stadium. I watched Florida State and Florida there one year, many, many years ago. It was cool. It was not as nice as Oklahoma's or A&M's, though. But it was cool for what it was.
Autzen would be cool. Oregon's.
Yeah, Oregon's would be a pretty cool one. Ohio State would be cool, like you said. Those are kind of the main ones probably. Let's see here. Ashley Hodge, what non-football Baylor athlete would have made the most on NIL if they were enrolling as a freshman with NIL rules and assuming their Baylor careers played out just like they did, meaning they stayed at Baylor for the length of time they stayed?
Wow, that's a tough question. You know what? I'm going to go with a recent one just because I think he's super likable. I think Baylor Nation kind of rallied behind him throughout his career. And it actually just ended. His career did, but I think he could have gotten a lot of he would have taken advantage of NIL, I think, just because of the person he is. I'm going to go with Jared Butler. I think that one makes a lot of sense. And he's playing a premier sport. And for me, that's it has to be football or basketball, in my opinion. And so I think it's probably him. There have been some other ones, though. I mean, if you look down the line, Isaiah Austin would have been an interesting one to see. Obviously, since he's 7 foot, how people would have maybe handled that. And he was a big 5-star recruit, so he might have gotten huge deals the moment he arrived at Baylor. So there's some others like that, Perry Jones as well. So those are kind of the ones that come to mind.
There's some wasted advertising dollars.
Yeah, I know.
Those Baylor basketball players. I'll go with the women's basketball players. I think Dede Richards would have made a killing if she started right now, especially. I mean, give her 4 years to build that up with these rules, and she would be like making 6 figures. So Dede immediately, Brittany Griner as well. I think in this atmosphere, starting right now, would be able to thrive. And if we're talking like as a whole, I think even the conversation about our personal life and all that would be different. And if it's all like, hey, they're starting right now, she'd be playing under Nikki Collin and not Kim Mulkey, and that would be a difference from when she was playing that I think would probably be beneficial to her in this day and age a bit more. But I mean, just take away all of that and what's changed since she was at Baylor, and you just go with like freak basketball player who's like an Olympian and better than most everybody else. And I think Brittany would have probably done well. But Dede's the one I think that like ground level up, 4 years of NIL, she would have killed it.
It's the personality thing. That's exactly what it is.
Brittany would have been like, just because you're like a once in a lifetime like type of athlete. Dede would have been just because of she's Dede and she's just got that personality. On the men's side, I was trying to think of somebody, and I was struggling, honestly, because those basketball players you mentioned, I mean, they make sense, but like Jared Butler, would probably be the dude. I'm trying to think if there's anybody that's come through recently that would have been a real difference maker. And there's not really a lot of big personalities on the football side or really like individual. I mean, Corey Coleman maybe would have made a good amount of money.
Sean Oakman because of the meme.
Sean Oakman, before everything hit the fan, for sure. Yep, he would have been another one. All right, thank you, Ashley. Yankee Bear, when will Justin Deleon get ranked by 24/7 Rivals? What ranking would you give him at this time?
Well, I don't work for 24/7 or Rivals, so I don't put rankings in for those guys, so I have no idea when he'll be ranked by them. We'll probably have him ranked soon.
I'll say this loosely. I've not been a Rivals member in a really, really long time or any of that stuff for a really long time. But if it's Rivals, give him like till his freshman year, wherever he goes, and they'll have an updated ranking, I'm sure.
Yeah, so as far as what I would give him, I'd probably say right now I'd probably have him around an 86 or an 87. So pretty solidly a 3-star. I think he's going to have a big year, though, and that's when we'll be able to change it and really potentially up it if he has a nice season over there in Kingsville.
All right, so appreciate that question. We will see on that front whenever they do update the rankings. But Brown BW and Alpha Needle and Sam and Rainmaker and K-Sig and Wacko and Scotty B and Bruin and DC and Chris C and Brown Bear, Ashley, and Yankee Bear, we do appreciate the questions this week, and hopefully we got the answers that you were looking for, or at least answered your questions and helped you out there. And we do appreciate you helping us out by sending in those questions every week. Grayson, before we head on out the door, anything to say, pass along, what have you?
Yeah, nothing to add this week. This was a really fun week, I would say, though. Great weekend. Happy 4th to everyone. Hopefully you had a great time over the weekend, and I know Baylor recruiting did. It was a lot of fun to kind of see that unfold over the holiday weekend. And, yeah, just wishing everyone safety and hope they had a great time.
Yeah, thanks to Armstrong, Sims, and Jack, the whole crew here, as we record, helping get things done behind the scenes. And, yeah, it was a nice little 4th of July weekend. I know that, it's turbulent times and what have you, but I am proud to be an American. I was proud to celebrate July the 4th. Our country is not perfect, but, man, we're sure as heck a lot better along than a lot of people out there, a lot of less fortunate people in less fortunate places. And I am proud to be an American, and just hope that we as a country continue to get better and improve and become, just what we can be and what we should be, not just in saying it, but actually doing it. But I do love this country, so happy July 4th out there to everybody, and hope you had safe, fun celebrations. And that's going to be our last long weekend for a while, I think.
Will be, yeah.
Yeah.
Till Labor Day, when Baylor plays Texas State.
That's right. So hopefully you enjoyed it, if that's going to be the case for you, like it will be for us. But that's why we do this, to start covering some games on weekends and have those filled up. And that's right around the corner, about a month away and just a week away from Big 12 Media Days at AT&T. So we'll have to figure out what to do about the podcast next week with that. I guess we record before, but
yeah, and we're gonna have a lot to talk about too. We're gonna have to get our all Big 12 teams out and our preseason. Yeah, I'm already done too, but we haven't talked about them yet, so we're gonna have to.
Yeah, I don't know. We're gonna go preseason position by position, because it's part of the team's just ridiculous. I mean, there's no need for a fullback spot. The offensive line pickings in the Big 12 this year aren't great. I'll say that. There's some good players, but there aren't a lot of big time players in the Big 12 this year, NFL wise. When you start looking at that, it's I don't know.
There'll be surprises.
There'll be some surprises. Yeah. There's going to have to be some surprises because there's some slim pickings at some spots. But yeah, we'll get into that and some other stuff next week. But we do appreciate you listening. Thanks as always. Spread the word. Tell a friend about SicEm365.com. It's been the Bearcast on SicEm365 Radio.